That's what this forum is all about. Answering questions honestly.
That's right.
And I appreciate that. We all do. Going to go into here. Bill, we are going through very difficult budgetary times. What would you prioritize and what would you cut?
First of all, I wouldn't pander to Martha. That's a ridiculous statement she made. I would never raise taxes. I would never vote to raise taxes. You never do that in the community. The one thing Martha didn't tell you about is one of her pet projects is the Solid Waste Authority. We're wasting way too much money in that. In fact, that's a perfect name for that program, Solid Waste. I don't know if you know this, but the county's run up over $2 million in debt because of that program. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to operate. She's raised the disposal rate on most, if not all, businesses in Delaware County. You know what you got for that? In addition to all the debt, you got a smaller trash can. Quite a deal. Would you waste money on that? I wouldn't. One of the first things I'll do if I'm elected is do everything I can to close the Solid Waste Authority down. Secondly, there are redundancies between the city and the county. There have been lots of discussions about whether or not the city and the county should merge or consolidate or something of that nature. I'm not a supervisor, so I'm not privy to contracts, employee agreements, things of that nature. But I do know that there are redundancies where money can be saved by eliminating situations where two people are performing the job of one. So, also, it's my understanding, again, though I'm not a supervisor, that although Martha said she's balanced the budget for 10 or 12, 15 years, I understand that you're required by law to balance the budget. And secondly, you shouldn't have to balance the budget on the backs of employees and ask them to make concessions that they shouldn't have to. Sorry.
Thank you, Bill. This question is to you, Bill. Do you believe that the Constitution is a, quote, living document, end quote, or do you believe in strict interpretation?
This question is right up my alley. The Constitution, when it was framed by some very bright men, brighter than I might ever be. Shortly afterwards, because we have a tripartite form of government with the legislative, executive, and the judicial branch, there was a case called Marbury versus Madison. That case stood for the proposition that the judiciary had sole discretion in interpreting the Constitution and legislation. I am a strict constructionist. I believe that the Constitution says what it says. It doesn't say what other people want it to say, whether they're supervisors or whether or not they're legislators or whether or not they're judges. Now there's, as you know with Obamacare, there's judicial review coming up. Now there's a difference between judicial review and judicial activism. Judicial review involves the Supreme Court of the United States or any other court reviewing to determine whether or not legislation is constitutional according to the construction of the Constitution. Judicial activism is a situation where you have judges that will legislate from the bench. And there are lots of cases where judges try to do that. So be careful when you hear the term judicial activism versus judicial review. From my standpoint, there is no variation. The Constitution says what it says. It does not say what people want it to say because of what time of the day or week it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Martha, do you believe that the Constitution is a, quote, living document, end of quote, or do you believe in strict interpretation?
Well, I think that the Constitution, the Founding Fathers were very clear in wanting to make sure that they had a document that worked, a document that would remove us from the leadership of kings and those kinds. But it has been changed 27 times. And during that, in fact, 27 times, and one of those times was when we changed our mind that we didn't like the 18th Amendment and we wanted to have beer again. So we came back and forth with that. There have been considerable court decisions that try to determine, is it a living document or is it strict interpretation? And I find that I would actually have to tell you that I think that it blends. The Mulberry versus Madison in 1803, that's when the Marshall Court found that they had standing. Up until that point, most, the judicial system, our balance of what we call it now, our three-point balance, was not really balanced. The court was just kind of out there to settle some disputes every now and again. It wasn't really running the government, so to speak. Then we have other, what I would consider, I know that there's some other issues, decisions that have given this group angst, and that would be the decision, the Gibbons decision in 1824, when we started talking about the Commerce Act. And we're still talking about it today, but I think that's what gives us, our glory, is that we get to still keep trying to talk about it as people. Then we have things like Plessy versus Ferguson, where we were going to have, where we were going to be separate but equal, and that held, you know, from 1896. That held all the way to 1954 when we had Brown versus Board of Education, and then we had Gideon versus Wainwright, which might be a tough one for people to swallow, but that's when everybody got to have the opportunity to have an attorney, not just in capital cases. So yeah, it's living, but at the same time, the language is strong and hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. We'll start with you on the last question, number 5. Other than government employment and welfare, what will you do to open new opportunities for our children in Del Norte County?
Well, having had the honor to be raised in Del Norte County and to raise my children in Del Norte County, and look into this room and see people that I grew up with in Del Norte County, I know we don't all leave. And I know that both of my children, my son is graduating and coming back to a job. My daughter is in nursing school with the dream of coming back to a job. And sometimes it takes that kind of, you know, there's tribes in New Zealand that say if the kids leave for a while and come back, they'll come back with honor and love of their community, and I believe that that works. But for the kids that are staying here, one of the things that I do as a school teacher is that I try to get them to learn how to think, write, and communicate. Because if I can get that, then when they enter the job world, they're going to be able to hang on to their job. I'm also working currently on 2 projects that we were able to get the funding for, and one is called a culinary training center that ideally, in my dream, we haven't done the analysis of where it's going to be, but I would like it to be here, and then it can be a place where College of the Redwoods could use it, Del Norte County Schools could use it, and also the public could use it to be able to take classes in order to be able to have some professional culinary experience. I also am working on, in support of the project that's talking about doing a meat processing plant where we will be able to slaughter our own animals here and then be able to package that, so that would be another set of training. And then I've worked with employers independently. When I have a student that has a shine, I take them to that employer and I ask that employer, give them a job, give them a try, and they do. And I have met employers, like I have an attorney friend who every year hires a senior. And if we could get all of our current businesses to hire a senior, we would find that our kids would have more opportunity. Thank you.